In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted and wiped Pompeii and Herculaneum off the map. The official story says it was a natural disaster. But when you look at what was actually in those cities and what the heat did to the bodies, a different picture starts to form. The people didn't just die. In the first pyroclastic surge, temperatures hit around 300 degrees Celsius, hot enough to kill in a fraction of a second. Their organs and blood were vaporized on the spot. That's why the famous plaster casts in Pompeii are mostly empty shells. The bodies inside literally disappeared. In Herculaneum, closer to the volcano, the surges reached 500 to 600 degrees Celsius. Skulls exploded, DNA was destroyed, soft tissue was erased completely. Pompeii wasn't just any Roman city. It was a centre of Egyptian mystery schools, temples to Isis, and pre-Christian spiritual knowledge. The kind of knowledge that didn't fit the new order that was rising. When the volcano hit, it didn't just kill people, it erased evidence. The heat was so intense, it removed the very proof of what was really happening there. This wasn't just bad luck with a volcano, it was a convenient purge. The same pattern we keep seeing: ancient knowledge, mystery traditions, and bloodlines that carried forbidden memory, wiped out in a single catastrophic event. The bodies were vaporized, temples were buried, and the story was written as a natural disaster. But the heat signature tells a different truth, and the knowledge that was lost that day has never been fully recovered. Pompeii was not a quiet Roman town. It was a working centre of mystery religion. The temple of Isis stood near the theatre, fully operational, with its own priests, rituals, and initiates. Egyptian gods were not exotic imports here, they were actively worshipped. The cult of Isis offered something the official Roman religion did not: personal salvation, an afterlife, and direct contact with a divine feminine force that predated Rome by thousands of years. That knowledge was not theoretical, it was practiced. A short walk away, the Villa of the Mysteries still shows the initiation frescoes of the Dionysiac cult. Life-size figures move through the stages of the rite: the preparation, the ordeal, the revelation, the sacred marriage. These were not decorations, they were instructions. The same city that housed the Isis temple also housed one of the clearest surviving records of a Greek mystery school still functioning under Roman rule. Across the bay in Herculaneum, the Villa of the Papyri held an entire philosophical library, hundreds of scrolls, many of them Epicurean and other schools, that did not fit the rising imperial and later Christian order. Most of those scrolls were carbonized. Some are only now being read with modern technology. Whatever else was in that library, the text that dealt with older non-Roman, non-Greek traditions, was either destroyed by the heat or remains unread. When the pyroclastic surges hit, they did not only kill the people, they vaporized the soft evidence of what those people knew and practiced. Bodies, blood, organic ritual materials, and unrecorded teachings disappeared in seconds. What survived was stone, fresco, and the empty shapes of the dead. The living transmission was cut. The timing sits neatly in the period when older Mediterranean mystery traditions were still strong and the new centralized religious structures had not yet fully replaced them. The volcano did the editing. The heat was selective in its own way. Stones survived, frescoes survived, the empty outlines of the bodies survived. Everything that carried living memory, flesh, blood, organic texts, the unwritten transmission of the mystery schools was erased in seconds. What remained was a perfect ruin, frozen at the exact moment the older knowledge was still operating inside the city. This is the same pattern that repeats across the map. Centres that held pre-Roman, pre-Christian, or non-approved spiritual technology have a habit of meeting sudden total destruction. The Library of Alexandria, the mystery sites of the Eastern Mediterranean, the older temples that were quietly closed or converted as the new order tightened. Pompeii sits in that sequence. It was not the first, it would not be the last, but it is one of the clearest because the method of erasure left the evidence of its own intensity. The official story treats the eruption as pure geology. The temperature data, the vaporized organs, the exploded skulls in Herculaneum, and the active Isis and Dionysiac centres inside the city tell a tighter story. A place still practicing older rites, still housing Egyptian and Greek mystery knowledge, still holding a philosophical library that did not belong to the coming consensus, was hit by a force hot enough to delete the organic carriers of that knowledge while leaving the stone shell intact. The living chain was broken, the monument was left standing. What was taken from us that day was not only the people, It was the uninterrupted line of initiation, the private teachings, and the practical methods that had survived inside those walls. The volcano did not just bury a city, it closed a chapter that was still open, and the heat signature shows exactly how thorough the closure was meant to be. The original function of those places, the practical continuation of older initiatory knowledge, is rarely placed at the centre of the narrative. The pattern is consistent. Centres that still carried pre-approved spiritual technology meet sudden, overwhelming force. What survives is the shell. What is emphasised later is everything except the reason the shell might have needed to be emptied. Pompeii stands as one of the clearest examples because the heat left a measurable signature of how complete the erasure of the organic layer was. The stone was allowed to remain, the living line was not. That is the deeper cut. The volcano did not only kill a city, it interrupted a working transmission of knowledge that did not belong to the order that was rising. And the way the story has been told ever since has kept that interruption looking like pure geology. When Pompeii was finally dug up centuries later, the story that was allowed to form around it was carefully limited. The focus stayed on daily Roman life, the plaster casts, the architecture, and the drama of a natural disaster. The active mystery cults, the Egyptian priesthood still functioning inside the city, and the philosophical library across the bay were treated as interesting side notes rather than central facts. The intensity of the heat, the vaporization of bodies, and the destruction of organic knowledge carriers was softened into a general tragedy. This is how the editing continues after the event. First, the living transmission is cut. Then the rediscovery is framed so that the most dangerous elements remain in the background. The Temple of Isis becomes a tourist curiosity. The Villa of the Mysteries becomes art history. The Carbonese scrolls of Herculaneum become a technical challenge for modern scanners. The original function of those places, the practical continuation of older initiatory knowledge, is rarely placed at the centre of the narrative. The pattern is consistent. Centres that still carried pre-approved spiritual technology meet sudden, overwhelming force. What survives is the shell. What is emphasised later is everything except the reason the shell might have needed to be emptied. Pompeii stands as one of the clearest examples because the heat left a measurable signature of how complete the erasure of the organic layer was. The stone was allowed to remain. The living line was not. That is the deeper cut. The volcano did not only kill a city, it interrupted a working transmission of knowledge that did not belong to the order that was rising. And the way the story has been told ever since has kept that interruption looking like pure geology. The heat at Pompeii did not only end lives, it ended a living chain. The Temple of Isis, the Dionysiac initiations, the philosophical library at Herculaneum, all of it was still operating when the surges hit. Organic carriers of that knowledge were vaporized. The stone shell was left standing. Centuries later, the rediscovery was framed as a natural tragedy and a window into ordinary Roman life, while the active mystery traditions inside the city were kept in the background. This is the same method we keep meeting. Interrupt the transmission, leave the monument. Control the story that forms around the ruins. Pompeii is one of the clearest examples because the temperature data still shows how thorough the organic erasure was. The bodies were not simply buried. In many cases, they were deleted. What survived was the empty shape of what had been there. The knowledge that walked those streets in 79 AD did not continue in an unbroken line. That is the real loss. And that is why the event still sits inside the larger pattern of centres that carried older, non-approved spiritual technology, meeting sudden and total interruption. The volcano provided the force. The narrative that followed provided the cover.